conversation that we're having around massive collective contraction. And it really does have all the feels and all the roadblocks in it. If you are excited to break down this upcoming Mercury retrograde in Cancer, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you are always up to date with what the stars have in store for you. Hi, I'm Maren. I am a professional astrologer, philosophy student, and author. I combine traditional Hellenistic astrological techniques with modern psychological counseling dynamics in order to provide grounded spiritual guidance. So, as always, your June monthly forecasts for your sign are linked down below so that after this video you can see what the rest of your June is looking like, not only just with this Mercury retrograde, but with other energies. And soon your July forecasts will be up during June as well. So I will link both the June and the July forecasts once those are out if you want to check those out after this video. Video is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online counseling service connecting you with licensed, board-certified state therapists that you can connect with in under 24 hours by signing up at this link. You can receive licensed counseling over your phone, tablet, or mobile device via phone call, text, or even video chat. BetterHelp also hosts group-in-our sessions every week where you're able to connect and converse with other members about topics like relationships and anxiety. BetterHelp costs $65 a week, and financial aid is available for those who qualify during registration. BetterHelp is not a crisis hotline, so I will leave resources for that below. BetterHelp is available worldwide. To get started, head on over to the link in the description where you can find affordable private counseling via the BetterHelp website anytime, anywhere. In under 24 hours, you can connect with the exact therapist that fits your needs and solve what you're looking for. Okay, so before we get started, let's go through some preliminary stuff. What's a retrograde? A retrograde is when a planet's motion appears to be moving backwards based on our vantage point here on Earth. Keyword there is appears, because no planet can actually orbit backwards, but in the way that Earth's orbit coincides with Mercury's orbit, it'll look like Mercury is moving backwards from our point of view on Earth. This leads to an inversion of the planetary significations because in astrology we are looking at movements and planetary cycles in a symbolic manner. So also the planet Mars is said to be moving backwards inherently. So when planets are retrograde, we can also understand them as adopting some of the Martian significations like being troublesome or quarrelsome. And it's not that Mercury then becomes Martian, it's about that symbolism showing up when Mercury is retrograde. So what does this mean for Mercury when it goes retrograde? Mercury signifies communication, transmissions, intellect, errands, speaking, etc. So these topics can be delayed, reversed, or have trouble manifesting clearly during these Mercury retrograde times. They're neither good nor bad. It's more of a time to just think of editing and revising rather than beginning fully anew. It's often why astrologers over the course of many centuries have discouraged things like signing contracts. Things like revising or editing or working through past works is more better suited to Mercury retrograde. And these do happen 3 times a year, every 3 months, resulting in a total of like about 3 months out of the year being a Mercury retrograde. So don't, to say the least, they aren't in and of themselves a big deal. Like the Mercury retrograde will have to have other mitigating factors making it more problematic for it to raise astrological alarms. On the hierarchy of astrological signals to be worried about, a Mercury retrograde is not really on the top of the list. It's more like problematic. It's more troublesome than it is inherently like systematically problematic in astrology speak. However, in like the present information age of clickbait titles and also just technology in general, Mercury retrograde has then kind of gotten a rise in tabloid astrology just because it's an easy thing to like make a big deal out of when it's not really like It's not that big of a deal. And notice that I say like coincides with these things, and it doesn't cause these things, because Mercury retrograde is not something to fear, to blame, or to view as causing your misfortunes. Mercury retrograde is something to view as a signal for these energies occurring, because astrology is a map. It's like the clock on the wall. The clock is not making it 3 p.m. It's reflecting the fact that it is 3 p.m. Astrology is signaling, it is not causing. You can watch a full breakdown on like how astrology works and the understanding of astrology as a sign, not as a cause, in this video here. But overall, Mercury retrograde is just, you know, a time of a little trouble. So Mercury will appear to stop in a certain degree of a certain zodiacal sign. It will then move backwards into an earlier degree of the zodiac, and then it will station direct to move forward again as usual. It does a little stop, station, back retrograde, forward, that kind of shape. And very, very important, Mercury cannot be in retrograde. It will never be in retrograde. That's like saying that it is in backwards. Mercury either is retrograde or is not retrograde, because retrograde is a motion. It is not some sort of like destination, so it cannot be in retrograde. Cut that shit out. Side note, if you want a more comprehensive video about the ins and outs of Mercury retrograde and how to know if you will be more victim to that energy, depending on like what I recommend for like a Mercury retrograde 101 survival guide, if you want that, let me know in the comments below, because that might be a cute video to do to let people know generally like what I recommend, what astrology principles tell us about Merc retros. Anyway, even though this particular Mercury retrograde does not start until the 18th, Mercury enters its retrograde shadow on June 2nd when Mercury reaches 5 degrees of Cancer. Mercury retrograde shadow means that Mercury is passing over the degrees that it will eventually return back to. So we're already entering territory that we will then again return to. Look to themes that come up during this time around the early part of June as to what may be revisited or dragged back up. Some small themes of communication, mishaps, and tech like bullshit could start happening and making themselves known, but the real show won't start until the 18th. Like, if your computer seems to be slow and glitchy, it's a good time to get that fixed if you can around now. Like, I know that it looks like my charger's on its last leg. I'm gonna make a point to get a new charger before the actual retrograde begins so that I'm not, you know, in a shit show, you know what I mean? So then Mercury retrograde begins on June 18th, 2020 at 14 degrees of Cancer. Mercury in Cancer indicates that communicative matters and intellectual trends are coming through the lens of the security-focused sign of Cancer. Cancer, as a cardinal water sign, is concerned with the initiation, cardinal, of emotions, water. To put it in a really simple lens, that's kind of how we can think of Cancer. And Cancer is also concerned with paving the way into what will bring the most serene, safe, and nurturing emotional environment. Mercury, as the planet, is the actor here, trying to communicate in a way that brings about emotional homeostasis and safety. And with Cancer, there's this like side-to-side motion of how the crab walks. And then with the retrograde, it's a bit of a backward motion of the crab, you know, waddling side to side. You can think of, for this, a metaphor, I talk in a lot of weird metaphor shit, but the metaphor for this retrograde I'm seeing is the crab scuttling side to side away from impending threats, like trying to gauge whether you're a threat or not and kind of going back to reevaluate what it needs to do to feel safe. So, general themes: reevaluating what brings us feelings of safety, what nourishes our soul, rethinking the current concept of who our true family is and who we want to actually surround ourselves with in this like literal new age, new earth, new normal. It's happening in the first decan of Cancer, associated with the Two of Cups tarot card. This is called the Lord of Love. It is a Venus-ruled decan, so even though Cancer is a moon-ruled sign, the decans are a cute way to think of what the third of each sign, what their superpower is, and this one has a bit of Venusian flair to it. So this is love untroubled by the complications of time. It's like a naive two teenagers falling in love for the first time, and it's an invitation to incorporate and honor the inner child within you as a necessary part of yourself moving forward, because sustainable growth in our dharma, in our path, will always relate back to that inner excitement of the inner child. Now, let's look at the other transits that are happening during this Mercury retrograde to really see what the color of the overall canvas is becoming during this time. So I go in depth into these transits more into my June collective forecast, which will also be linked down below, and my July one will be out soon as well, before July, so both of those you can see down below, so keep an eye out for that in a few days. But on the 20th, just 2 days after Mercury stations retrograde, the sun enters Cancer, and Mercury will still be at 14 degrees when the sun reaches 0 degrees of Cancer, meaning that Mercury will be under the sun's beams. Whenever a planet is within 15 degrees of the sun, it's said to be under the sun's beams, where it's combust, blinded, or rendered useless. Their significations are combust, they're blinded, and they're made hidden for the time being. This is a signal of retreating within, or keeping our emotions secret, or not being emotionally acknowledged by others. There's an emotional secrecy here to what we're communicating. We're hiding our true emotions initially during this time. Then on the 21st, there is a solar eclipse, aka a radically, a new moon on steroids in Cancer happening. I have a full video on this, which is a really pivotal, this is a actually really dramatic lunation here. It's a defining moment of this summer. This 18th month cycle of eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn is coming to an end, and it's directly involving this Mercury retrograde. The sun and the moon are co-present with Mercury retrograde in Cancer, and so part of this huge new beginning is involving a reanalysis of what will actually make us feel good during this time. The pendulum may have swung hugely in one direction of hyperproductivity or of laziness during this time of isolation and quarantine, and we may realize that to reharmonize, to find our own internal equilibrium, it's about honoring our rhythms here and now, not necessarily what they were months ago when we were overwhelmed by this shit initially. Overall, this is a pretty confusing, nuanced, both abrasive and kind of numb new beginning, and it asks for honest contemplation of what will comfort you in this time, which does not involve past inertia of habit, and that can take a little bit of discomfort to realize what's actually going to bring you comfort. It asks for an acknowledgement of what is no longer just about you, and what makes you feel safe in knowing that you're part of a collective, thinking about what collectively needs to ideologically change in the way that we process information from our environment and take care of what we consider our home to be. So don't focus solely during this time on either your cravings of what you want to fill up with because you feel unfairly treated, or an external environment feeling unsafe. The higher cause that you're living for is above all that, and this Mercury retrograde makes that really apparent, that we have to be thinking about the greater picture of the home that we share with everyone. This Mercury retrograde is a major component of this pivotal part of 2020, because the Mercury retrograde itself is not a big deal, but it's part of a big deal, and so therefore it is integral to understand how this contemplative reset is important. It's not like one I'm going to try to portal hype or clickbait up, but it is resonant with the larger themes happening in 2020. Then on the 25th, Venus is stationing direct in Gemini, and you can watch my full video on this Venus retrograde as well, because this is another retrograde in the year of retrogrades that is a situation. But Venus stationing direct, basically with the Venus retrograde, Venusian topics like love, money, pleasures, women are flipped inside out a bit. And this was in Mercury's sign, so Mercury kind of has less on its hands now that it doesn't have to look after Venus being in its sign and being a bit troublesome during its retrograde. So this is a bit of fresh air to focus on going more within once Venus is direct and relationships make a bit more sense, so that we're not also fighting with other people, we're just fighting within our own emotions basically. We could have dealt with the reevaluation of relationship dynamics during that past Venus retrograde, and we could have also returned to past notes, past pleasures and learning, past courses we never finished. With Venus stationing direct, then we're like not in the clear, but we're now turning around with the information that we've learned about relationships, partnerships, and passionate learning to move more ahead and mentally reevaluating. So that the Venus retrograde station is like the momentum going from rethinking to now implementing those foundations. And part of having now more upgraded values means communication and what we feel comfortable declaring must also change. Like our values have changed, so now the way that we articulate those verbally is going to necessitate change. On June 27th, then Mars enters Aries, and this means that there's going to be a sign-based superior square from Mars in its home sign, very strong in its home sign, to Mercury in Cancer, and this is a case of maltreatment, which basically it's not cute. When Mars is in a superior square to something, it is maltreating it, especially in daytime charts. Emotional volatility, provoking others when you feel hurt, attacking from a place of feeling attacked, hitting them where you know that they'll hurt just so you feel bigger, big emotional immaturity in general. Like, those are all themes that could come up during this time. So don't do something stupid to those that you love. Let things come to the surface and air out, obviously, but don't say something you know you're going to regret in just a few minutes or days or weeks just because you want to have lasting impact. Like, there's going to be consequences in the home environment if the foundation is shattered. That's just the big thing that I would caution against during this Mercury retrograde, is you don't want to say anything out of emotional provocation that you wouldn't want to be a precedent for the other foundations in your life, basically. On July 1st, then, Saturn is retrograding back into Capricorn, so I have a full video up on Saturn in Aquarius, and it goes into what these few years of Saturn will mean. And it talks about Saturn going back into Capricorn for a little bit, because when Saturn entered Aquarius, it was already late in its synodic cycle and it was going to retrograde back soon. So Mercury will be at 9 degrees while Saturn is at 29 degrees of Capricorn, so it's not like there is a prominent degree-based opposition here, but there's still a sign-based opposition from Saturn, and Saturn is in its home sign, and the opposition is of the nature of Saturn, so there's a lot of like Saturnian boundaries happening around our ability to articulate ourselves here. And Mercury is now enclosed by both malefics through a square from Mars to Mercury and through an opposition from Saturn to Mercury. Like, the rays are literally enclosing it, which indicates going bad from worst. It's called besiegement in the medieval tradition, and it's not cute. Not cute. Not cute. Watch what you say. You might be heavily censored or stifled by your environment, and this can lead to quick jabs of just wanting to feel heard. And you could feel like there's a big brother at play here, but it's not worth fucking up a lot just because you're really provoked right now. Then on the 5th, there's a lunar eclipse, a full moon at 13 degrees of Capricorn. There's a full video on this one as well, down below. This is another markedly sober, really harsh letting go. It's the final eruption to an 18th month chapter of our lives, about breaking down the structures of our old lives to get clear about what values really matter to us. And the Sun in Cancer will be conjunct Mercury retrograde. So with Mercury retrograde under the Sun's beams, it's combust, it's made secret. It is already retrograde in a sign where it tends to operate with a shell anyway. So this time, this point during the retrograde cycle is definitely not highlighting the communication getting any easier, and we likely don't feel safe to open up about the degree to which we are in discomfort right now. The emphasis of the emotional center in Capricorn, where the moon is fallen during this eclipse, and the Sun lighting up these nourishing ideas in Cancer while Mercury is combust and retrograde, is us feeling scared shitless while knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even though we have an inability to let that be known necessarily yet. We're digging our heels in very deeply, and it's a pivotal moment in this Mercury retrograde as Mercury does approach its direct station. There might be a breaking point with loved ones, and this really does indicate with how slow Mercury is, because the slower a planet is, the more vulnerable it is, like the less momentum it has behind it. And when planets are at their station, either stationing direct or retrograde, there's a particular acuteness to them. They're very much channels for the immense provocation of that energy. And this does seem like a combustion of internal energy that isn't communicated, but that there's a breaking point anyway. And then July 12th, Mercury is stationing direct at 5 degrees of Cancer. We're not in the clear as much as we're just beginning to turn around and move ahead, because stations don't mean suddenly like, woohoo, we're in the clear. It means, okay, we're not moving back any further. We still have to get the gears going though. It is applying to another degree-based square with Mars and Aries now at that point. So be careful around a lot of I told you so's that could be coming up, and like emotional, like gotcha shit with Mercury now direct. It will not clear shadow until it passes 14 degrees of Cancer on July 26th, because clearing shadow means that it leaves the range that it once retrograded back through, and it stationed retrograde at 14 degrees earlier in June. So this is when the bleed over and the sorting out will finally ease up some and move ahead fairly distinguishedly. Even though with Mercury now close to opposing Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn, the intensity is only ramping up now that we're speaking our emotional tantrums instead of holding them in. So watching the collective forecast and the forecast for your July sign, which those will be linked down below as well, will give more insight into how this is playing out for you and your sign. But like, there's just a lot of vibes happening here, and it's no one's fault. It just is. That's what I'm going to be saying throughout this, even though I don't foresee any relational problems for me or home problems for me because I live alone and I'm a literal hermit. I know with like what I'm spewing out and teaching on and reflecting back, just reminding you that it's no one's fault. It simply is. I'm telling myself that when I get worked up about the fact that like this whole world shit wouldn't have happened if we weren't eating animals. My thing is just like, well, we can't blame one single person. We can say that society is how it is. It doesn't explain it, but it takes the egoic ramp up on blaming someone out of it. If you enjoyed this and you would like to check out my private astrology consultations, you can check those out below. I would love to read for you. In the description, you can find that. Also, my company, Rashi, is a platform that connects spiritual practitioners with their ideal clients. So it's a spiritual Yelp service, and if you're looking to get your ideal clients or your ideal healers during this time, Rashi is down below, along with everything with BetterHelp as well. So otherwise, make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment down below any thoughts that you have about this upcoming Mercury retrograde, how you're feeling, if you know it's showing up in your chart. Like, what house is Cancer for you? Where is this happening? I would love to know. Otherwise, sending so much love, and I will see you in the next video. There is one